Very frequently, I'm asked the question, what is the connection between the mind-body axis, lifestyle, integrative medicine approaches, and my own field of endocrinology and metabolism? So here's a very short summary. Endocrinology and metabolism is the study of neurochemicals of hormones. Hormones mainly in the what we call the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid axis. In addition, there are hormones secreted by the pancreas such as insulin and glucagon. And sometimes excess belly fat also acts as an endocrine gland. How does this relate to mind-body approaches and integrative medicine? The most obvious one, of course, is stress. If you're stressed, then the levels of cortisol and adrenaline go up in your blood. And these increase inflammation in the body at many levels. And inflammation, directly or indirectly, is connected with many chronic illnesses, from bronchial asthma to rheumatoid arthritis to autoimmune disorders to immunocompromised biological systems, therefore more susceptibility to infection and also to some types of cancer. So when you can handle stress through meditation, particularly, which is in my field, I've been teaching meditation for many years, 3 decades, and I teach many kinds of meditation: self-reflection, self-awareness, transcendence, conscious choice making, knowing the difference between what you perceive and what's really going on. But anyway, these meditative practices help quieten the mind, and then the body quietens, and the stress levels come down, cortisol comes down, and so does adrenaline. And as a result of it, the body goes in the direction of homeostasis. Homeostasis is self-repair and self-regulation. That's the most obvious. But it's also now known that there are certain things that affect the endocrine system very dramatically. So lack of sleep, for example, causes a disruption in two hormones called ghrelin and leptin. These hormones regulate what is called satiety in our brain. So we have something called a satiety center, and when leptin and ghrelin are out of balance, then you feel excessively hungry. But these hormones interact with insulin and cortisol, disrupt metabolism, and create a vicious cycle. Excess cortisol causes accumulation of belly fat. Belly fat, in turn, becomes an endocrine organ, influences insulin, causes insulin resistance, slows down cortisol metabolism, and therefore belly fat increases more belly fat, which increases more belly fat, and which causes more endocrine disruption. So sleep is a very important part. Similarly, exercise. So there are several kinds of exercise: aerobic exercise and weight training. When you build muscle mass, that increases your metabolism. And that, of course, has an effect on many hormones. Growth hormone, which is an anabolic hormone, and also influences cortisol, influences insulin resistance, and therefore exercise has, again, an effect on restoring self-repair mechanisms, homeostasis, decreasing inflammation. What about yoga and breathing techniques? So the yoga practices, which are called asanas, and there are many kinds of asanas, have different effects on the autonomic nervous system, the balance between the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. When your sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive, that means you're stressed and you have all the endocrine imbalance that goes with stress. When on the other hand, your parasympathetic nervous system is active, or is more active, and you stimulate the vagus nerve, then self-repair mechanisms get activated, and your heart shows something called increased heart rate variability, which also is a very interesting marker for whether you're stressed or not. And so yoga and breathing exercises, and there are, by the way, 108 breathing exercises that have all kinds of diverse effects on the central nervous system and therefore on the endocrine system, because the pituitary, hypothalamus, cortex, and the peripheral endocrine glands are all connected. So breathing exercises called pranayama are very effective in restoring balance to the body, or also eliciting specific effects. So there are breathing practices like bhastrika, which increase metabolism, breathing practices, pranayams like ujjayi breathing, which specifically influence diaphragmatic movement and therefore increase endurance. There are breathing practices like alternate nostril breathing that decrease metabolism because of the effect on the parasympathetic nervous system. Similarly, asanas, the practices of yoga with different postures, have different effects on the body. I'll be making more videotapes on this, but there are now studies that show that some yoga asanas can improve patients' condition in, say, congestive heart failure even more than standard drugs. But asanas are also very important in increasing muscle strength and flexibility, and therefore influencing what happens as we age. Because as we age, flexibility of muscle and strength of muscles decreases. Those are also mind-body practices. I forgot to mention, during sleep, your growth hormone levels go up, and growth hormone is an anti-aging hormone and also an anabolic hormone, and counteracts the effects of insulin, and it's insulin resistance that frequently is associated with type 2 diabetes and obesity, which then is associated with Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, inflammation, autoimmune illnesses, many types of cancer. So there's a direct relationship, really, between insulin, cortisol, growth hormone, hormone called prolactin. Recently, a lot of attention has been paid to neurotransmitters such as oxytocin, dopamine, opiates, which are endorphins, and of course, the love hormone is oxytocin, and of course, serotonin. So these are very important hormones, or neurotransmitters: oxytocin, dopamine, um, serotonin, and opiates. These have diverse effects. Some of them are antidepressants, some of them increase emotional bonding, but what is very interesting is that they're all immunomodulators, which means they fine-tune your immune system, which results in homeostasis and self-repair. If your immune system is over-aggressive, then you have propensity to autoimmune illnesses and inflammation. If your immune system is under-responsive, then theoretically there's increased risk of infections and even some types of cancer. So you see there's a direct connection here between what are called neurotransmitters, which are frequently called the molecules of emotion, and immunomodulation, modulating and fine-tuning the activity of your immune system. Therefore, healthy emotions such as love, compassion, joy, equanimity are actually associated with molecules that shift your body into self-repair, homeostasis, self-regulation. Unhealthy emotions such as hostility, cynical mistrust, guilt, shame, depression, fear shift your endocrine system in the direction of adrenaline, cortisol, which increases inflammation in the body. So when I see patients, I'm very cognizant of the fact that sleep, movement, yoga, breathing techniques, meditation, exercise, healthy emotions are very crucial in restoring balance and activating the healing mechanisms in the body. Now, there's one more thing that I haven't mentioned, and that is diet. So recently, it has come to our attention that, for example, GMO foods or foods that are processed, manufactured, refined, these foods have a disruptive effect on our metabolism. Wheat, for example, causes something called wheat belly. And the reason it does so is not necessarily because of its carbohydrate content, but it does so because it disrupts endocrine metabolism. And it does so through a wide variety of mechanisms. One of them, of course, is it increases cytokines in our cell biology, and cytokines are associated with inflammation in the cell. There are other enzymes like telomerase that activate or telomerase that get activated in meditation and increase the length of telomeres. And the length of telomeres or the shortening of telomeres is associated with accelerated aging, which occurs, of course, if you're stressed or if you have unhealthy emotions or if you are lacking in sleep or exercise, etc. So food, I've mentioned that food should not be refined, processed, manufactured, in my view, genetically altered, and food that contains pesticides and, of course, insecticides. The word pesticide, insecticide, means it kills a pest, kills an insect, but we share genetic material with these pests, and therefore what kills a pest ultimately will kill you. In fact, all insecticides and pesticides are derived from petroleum products, the same things that created Agent Orange, which was used in warfare. So introducing these foods increases the warfare in your body. Finally, I've been asked, what I mean by quantum healing. And quantum healing is a metaphor that I have used to say that a shift in consciousness allows a shift in biology. I think I've explained how that happens. But on a deeper level, consciousness also influences our thoughts, our cognition, our perception, our personal relationships, our social interactions, our biology, and our interaction with the environment and the choices we make. Therefore, shifts in consciousness and understanding self-awareness, which is consciousness, at a very fundamental level, changes everything. It changes how we think, it changes how we behave, it changes how we perceive our interactions with the world, it changes whether we feel separate or connected, and therefore it changes biology. And this is very fundamental. So I hope I've explained what I mean by quantum healing. Healing is a self-repair, self-regulation process in the direction of homeostasis. When you go to medical school, which I did as part of my education to become a doctor, the first two things that you learn in physiology are homeostasis and inflammation. Both these are protective mechanisms. So the inflammatory response is very necessary. If you injure yourself, you fall down, you get a bruise, that's the inflammatory response. But actually, if you get an infection, that's also the inflammatory response. When the inflammatory response is exaggerated, which it is these days because of our disruptive lifestyles, because we've lost the ability to integrate what happens in the mind with what happens in the body, then excessive inflammation can cause all kinds of chronic illnesses. The second lesson in medical school is homeostasis. What creates self-regulation? It's a natural response of our body when it's not interfered with. And how do we interfere with it? Well, of course, through stress, through lack of sleep, through not getting enough movement, through toxic diets. This, in short, is the connection that we have between what we call mind-body medicine, integrative medicine, lifestyle approaches, endocrinology, and metabolism. The principal hormones that come into play are, first of all, the hypothalamic hormones, such as thyrotrophin releasing factor, adrenocortical releasing factor, and many other trophic hormones that influence the pituitary. And the pituitary in turn influences the thyroid, the adrenal glands, and of course, through the secretion of hormones like growth hormone and other neurotropic factors influence insulin glucagon ratios. Insulin resistance is responsible for obesity and type 2 diabetes, and glucagon is a hormone that is an antagonist of insulin. It's pretty complicated, but you just have to remember one thing: the body is a symphony, and every hormone interacts with every hormone, and there are networks of hormones that interact with networks of hormones, and there are networks of genes that interact with genes as well. Now, a new frontier has emerged in the last few years, which is the microbiome. So it's estimated that of the 600 trillion cells that we have, over 90% of them are actually bacterial cells. So we are a walking bacterial colony with a few human cells attached to it. There is a connection between the genes of these bacterial cells and our own genes, and they're part of us actually. All of human biology until recently was understood examining only 10% of us. The microbiome is in our skin, it's in our gut, it's in all our cavities, and this microbiome responds to every bite that you eat. So what you put in your body influences the microbiome. If what you put in your body is inflammatory, or food that increases inflammation, then the microbiome gets inflamed and the genes get downregulated in the direction of inflammation. Those genes in turn interact with human genes. Now, knowing this about the microbiome, massage with herbalized oils, we know shifts the microbiome of the skin. Detoxifying diets, which are high in fiber content, plant content, contain oils like primrose oil, olive oil, sesame oil, flaxseed oil, also change the microbiome. And as they change the microbiome in the direction of homeostasis, then your body is affected. As my friend Larry Smarr, who's an expert in the microbiome, said, if you're not happy, then your microbiome will be unhappy. And if your microbiome is unhappy, then you will be unhappy, because they're all inseparably one. So unhealthy emotions, particularly inflammatory emotions. What are inflammatory emotions? Hostility, anger, guilt, shame, mistrust. Anything that separates us from life will alter even the microbiome. And the genes of the microbiome are also influencing the production of proteins. This is a new frontier again. It's called proteomics. And you can look at cell biology at many, many levels: cytokines, hormone levels, proteins. So we produce about 30,000 proteins every day, if not more, through our genes. But since our genes respond to environment, the field is called epigenetics, then of course we are influencing all the proteins in our body. It's not only complicated, but it's fascinating to see the connection between our mind, our emotions, our thoughts, our perceptions, our gene regulation or gene activity, the proteins that are produced, and the connection with the microbiome, which interacts with human cells. It's fascinating because it opens up a new frontier and advances the science of mind-body medicine, integrative medicine, lifestyle medicine, and its connection to endocrinology and metabolism. I'll be updating our research on this, but meanwhile, I hope I've answered your question. What is the connection between mind-body integrative lifestyle approaches, endocrinology, and metabolism? Thank you so much for asking the question.